former British paratrooper on the show goes, well, look, in the UK, we've got X thousand soldiers who are on prime active duty, but that's a 24-hour call-up. We don't have thousands of people on a 1-hour response time.
We also don't have a captive population of 2 million. Again, it's a bullshit comparison. This guy's either thick as shit or he's disingenuous, and I think it's a mixture.
Historically speaking, no country at war is required to provide aid to enemy civilians.
I'm not sure I've heard of the term enemy civilians. Israel is not providing aid. It's the rest of the world providing the aid. It's Israel that's bombing and blocking the aid. All they're saying is just let the aid that is at the borders in.
40 to 50,000 people in a highly geographically concentrated area. Tiny area. Tiny area. 50,000 people.
This twat, when it suits him, he will say, oh, it's a tiny area with so many terrorists and so densely populated. How are we supposed to distinguish? How are we not going to have collateral? And on the other hand, when it suits him, he will argue, oh, why are these terrorists situating themselves in areas that are highly populated? Why don't they go somewhere else where there's less people? It shows the duplicity.
When October the 7th happened, I was like, the people who are responsible for what comes after this is the people who did this. Because any leader of any country would react in something like this way, or probably worse.
He's basically justifying that, well, if they killed 5 times as many people as they have, if they dropped a nuke, maybe, I don't know, maybe it's a question for him. Or maybe we have to actually get rid of the population entirely. The bottom line is, it's Hamas's fault.
Final question is always the same. What's the one thing we're not talking about that we really...
The fact that you're both dickheads. Okay. I've listened to some of this already. I was listening to it thinking... words cannot express how I feel, to be honest, at times. It's just such rubbish, some of the stuff that spews out this individual's mouth, and it's really not hard to rebuttal. Dave Smith, I think, generally gives a good breakdown of these things and the rubbish that is mixed in with them and the sort of false portrayals and stuff. But in this instance, I do feel like he fell a bit short, you know? So be it, whatever. The only reason I'm doing this is because I'm just so disgusted by just the crap that comes out of these guys' mouths, and it's just such... Anyway, so I'm just going to go almost bullet point by bullet point. If you want to watch this crap in your own time, feel free. Unfortunately, I've done so to some extent. I knew I'd get irritated listening to it, and I didn't want to just sit there and just listen and not just rebuttal some of the crap that comes out this guy's mouth. This will not be a comprehensive breakdown of this video. I don't care about much of what he's saying, to be honest. There are specific points that are just rubbish, and it only takes a layman, honestly, like myself, just to point them out.
I look at Tucker and his anti-interventionist stance, and I think a lot of it, and Constance and I talk about this all the time, we think that a lot of it comes from the fact that, you know, if you are pro-war and pro-intervention, then you see something go so horrifically wrong, so terribly wrong. And it's not just the, you know, the millions of people that died. It's also the servicemen that come back who believed in an idea. Had their...
So you just listen to this fucking moron. I don't know if I can swear at this point, but just...
And it's not just the, you know, the millions of people that died.
It's not just the millions of people that died. This is these guys' disgusting attitude, to be honest. I do not believe I'm being unfair in this at all.
It's also the servicemen that come back who believed in an idea. Had their, let's be fair, they had their lives completely ruined. And the number of them that then went on to commit suicide or develop drug problems, alcohol problems, that would, if I was gung-ho, which I wasn't, but if I was, that would really make me look at myself in a very deep and profound way.
I genuinely think these two Muppets really do place higher value on their own. Put it that way.
I come from a place where we don't have political correctness in Russia. So people don't pretend that all of this isn't true.
Right.
You know, all of this stuff American people are told about, you know, we're going out there to spread democracy, or they hate us because of our freedom. I mean, with Islamists, and we'll get onto that, that is partly true, but generally speaking, it's about we want to control the land. We want to control the money.
Your position has been very interesting on the Middle East. It's mainly been that you've been, could I characterize it as being kind of pro-Palestinian in your outlook? In the way that you see it, or would you put it another way?
Yeah, I wouldn't say pro-Palestinian. I mean, I'm not like, I don't even know exactly what that means. Like, I'm not saying like I'm against what's been done to them. I would be against that being done to, I think, just about any group of people. So no, I don't think I'm pro-Palestinian. I think I'm pro-American. But I'm certainly a critic of Israel's destruction of Gaza.
So what is it in particular? Did you feel that it was disproportionate, the violence, or I should put it another way, the Israeli response to October 7th? Did you feel that was disproportionate? Was there another way that it should have been done?
Put it a different way,
There's lots of other ways.
Don't say violence.
The violence, or I should put it another way, the Israeli response to October 7th, did you feel that was disproportionate? Was there another way that it should have been done?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's lots of other ways that it could have been done, and certainly it was disproportionate. But I think that, I think it's horrible.
It's incredible that at this point, this Muppet, he has the nerve to switch from violence to Israeli response. And I know it might be nitpicking to an extent, but to be defending, to have a general tone of defense of the overall action, it's just fucking.
And I think that it's that America shouldn't be involved in it. I think it does nothing but cause a headache for our country. And you can see that all over the place. Like, even if you're for the war, you kind of can't deny that, like, this has caused major turmoil here. It was a major problem for the Democrats politically. It's a major problem for Donald Trump politically right now. It is not good for, as it says in the preamble to the Constitution, it is not good for domestic tranquility at the very least. But also, yeah, I don't believe that we should be involved in, like, this horrific, I don't even think you can call it a war, the destruction of a captive people.
Because there's a lot of people who would say, and I'm sympathetic to this, which is, you have Iran, which are essentially funding terror cells right the way through the Middle East, Hezbollah, Hamas, amongst others, which are effectively destabilizing the region. And there's a lot of Muslim Arabic countries who despise Iran because they see them as an existential threat to their existence, which they are. They're Islamist in nature. So by that, you would argue that unless you deal with the threat of Hamas.
The bullshit implicit in what this moron here has just said is, he is implying that these terrorist groups, as he puts it, that are destabilizing the Middle East, not Israel, the terrorist groups that are destabilizing the Middle East are funded by Iran, and that's that, basically. It's not like they have any justified disdain for the Israeli state. No, it's purely funding. This is the way these guys talk, to be honest with you. You know, it's just fucking ridiculous anyway.
Unless you deal with the threat of Hezbollah, you are essentially going to have a Middle East which is more unstable, which is going to become a hotbed of terrorism, which eventually is going to impact the safety of nations around the Middle East, but also in the West and in the United States.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of people who are arguing if we don't take this...
Because basically Hezbollah has never had a reason, right, to take up arms against Israel. It is only because they are a destabilizing force that is funded by Iran. That's it. There's no reason. There's no reason for their existence besides hatred of Jews, probably is what they would say, and the funding of Iran.
Or that group out is going to lead to instability in the Middle East, and every single time we go to make that move, it leads to more instability.
Maybe if you got rid of Israel, you might find more stability. Who knows? You know,
stability in the Middle East, and I flat out reject the idea that Iran is an existential threat to any of those Sunni states in the region. But Saudi Arabia, who are we talking about? Jordan, Egypt, like
UAE. I mean, if you speak to people in those countries,
I'm sure they're concerned about them.
They're very concerned.
Yes, of course, and there's a Sunni Shiite beef that's been going on for many, many years, and there's a lot. But the idea that, like, the U.S. sock puppet states over there are really threatened by Iran, I just don't think is right.
They do feel that.
Yeah, okay, fine, but, like, I don't.
Yeah, because they're U.S. sock puppets, as he says. These dictators that they're talking about, right, that they're referring to, Saudi, UAE, whatnot, their public is either deluded and thinks that, you know, these are just guys who are, you know, telling the Americans, sort Israel out, you know, free Palestine and all of that. They're either, unfortunately, you know, they've drank the Kool-Aid, as they say, right? Or they're just basically Zionists, isn't it? They're just pro-Israel, pro-West, pro-American domination and American empire, as this moron was defending earlier.
That I don't think Iran.
And that's, you know, apparently that's fine.
Iran is taking over Saudi Arabia. Like, what do you mean existential threat here? They're going to take out one of these countries?
Well,
unlikely.
Take out is, I mean, countries don't tend to take each other out, but go to war.
If you're talking about Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, like the people who Iran has been in business with, and I think of those groups, Hezbollah the most, you know what I mean? Like, there's real direct connections and training and stuff there. It's a little bit different with the Houthis and with Hamas. But again, those weren't the enemies of the American people. You know, when we go back to 9/11, and it's been really fascinating how, like, the war on terror just, like, totally shifted over to being this whole other group that has nothing to do with knocking our towers down or attacking the Pentagon or any of that. Our beef was always with the Sunni radicals, and the Sunni radicals are actually at war with a lot of those groups that you're talking about.
Well, the Sunnis have changed, right? The Saudi regime, the UAE regime, they are very not extremist. The Saudis used to spread extremism throughout Europe. They're not doing it now, the people in charge, right? So the extremists and the terrorists are mostly now being funded and spread by Iran, I think is Francis' point.
Yeah, okay, but even that, I mean, I don't know that that's exactly right. I mean, I think you're probably right in your characterization of Saudi Arabia's evolution and UAE.
The UAE. What a time, right? So this was uploaded on the 12th of November, and this disgusting fucking clown, maybe I'll have to mute some of this, but I just can't stand the prick, to be honest. This prick is holding up the UAE at the moment, given the situation of Sudan. Fucking irony, man.
With Iran, when they use rhetoric like we want to wipe Israel off the face of the earth, You know that they are funding terror cells. There is the suspicion that they've got nuclear weapons. If you say those types of words...
Is there really a suspicion that they have nuclear weapons? No one's even claimed that. No one's even claimed that.
And something awful happens.
You know who has? His fucking boys. His boys have them. Even though they've signed the non-proliferation treaty.
That's going to destabilize the world, whatever. Whatever happens, that's going to start a war.
Well, I don't think anyone's speculating that Iran has nuclear weapons. I don't think there's any.
Well, they're on the point of maybe getting nuclear weapons. Which
maybe for 30 years.
is why the strike happened.
They chant mean things is not good, but that's also not a justification for a war. Or it's nowhere even approaching a justification for a war. And I do think...
But it goes beyond chanting mean things, Dave.
Okay, but that is what you brought up. So I'm saying, like, look, I think when people look at these things, like in the same way that if you were looking at a trial, you don't just look at what the prosecution says, you look at what the defense says also. Even if it's a really, really bad person, you still look at what the defense says as well. If you talk to people, I've talked to several Iranians about this, but if you ask around, why do they hate America? Why do they hate America? What do you think the most common answers are? Like what? Because it's very clear. There's two that are really big that come up all the time. And it's not the same reasons why the Bin Ladenites hated us. It's kind of different things. But the two big beefs they have is that we overthrew their government in 1953 and imposed the Shah on them. And the other one is that we backed Saddam Hussein when he did the worst thing he's ever done, which was launch the war, the Iraq-Iran war. He killed 500,000 Iranians and used chemical weapons and all types of horrible things. Yes, they chant mean things about us. We could also look at the rhetoric out of DC and out of Tel Aviv. Not too friendly toward Iran either. You know, we put them on the axis of evil after 9/11, invaded and destroyed the two countries that touched them, right? Iraq and Afghanistan.
By the way, they say chant mean things like death to America and so on. When you actually speak to people, they're not talking about killing everyone. This is not some genocide thing. They're talking about the leadership, the military, those who are imposing upon them, you know. The bullshit that is implicit in what this guy is saying, this muppet, is that they want all Americans dead or something like that. It's just dishonest, isn't it? This is a problem. To be honest with you, I wouldn't even spit in this guy's face. It's not that I've ever done that before, but I'm just so disgusted by them because I think they're disingenuous liars and they have the worst possible take on everything they disagree on. Do you know what I mean? There's no honesty, to be honest. I don't think there is. There's a bullshit decora or whatever of, it's fair enough, you might disagree. No, it's just pure bullshit coming out of these guys' mouths. And fundamentally, I think they're disingenuous. And that's what pisses me off the most.
Weird to hear Americans or Brits talk about their rhetoric.
And they're occasionally thick too, so someone like me is able to reply here and there, cherry picking my replies.
Correct. And what a threat they are to the Western world. It's like, hey, there's been a lot. John McCain was singing bomb, bomb, bomb Iran when he was running for president.
Bro, these fuckers in Israel, they're signing bombs, by the way. They've been signing bombs, and that woman, I forgot her name now, the American who was running, she was signing as well, whatever the fucking clown there, what her name was. These guys are signing bombs that you're dropping, and you know kids are going to be killed, innit? Let's say, right, at a certain point you felt, okay, we need to drop bombs on Gaza, right? Let's just say you thought that. You know that civilians are going to get killed in the process. You know that. Collateral, let's say it's accidental, collateral, whatever, yeah? Why the fuck are you signing those bombs, you disgusting bastards? And this prick, he won't talk about that. Have you ever, I've never heard him mention that. Maybe he has, I don't know.
Hillary Clinton, you talk about threatening to wipe them off the map. What were her exact words, if you remember? We will totally eradicate, totally decimate Iran, or all of these things.
Well, the question was, if Iran were to launch a nuclear attack on Israel, what would our response be? And I want the Iranians to know that if I'm the president, we will attack Iran. Whatever stage of development
the Iranians
in their nuclear weapons program in the next 10 years, during which they might foolishly consider launching an attack on Israel, we would be able to totally obliterate them. That's a terrible thing to say, but those people who run Iran need to understand that, because that perhaps will deter them from doing something that would be reckless, foolish, and tragic.
And we actually have the might to do it, and we've attacked them. They haven't attacked us. So again, I would just say that zooming out to the bigger picture, yes, Iran funds groups that are a pain in the ass to Israel. That is certainly true. And there's a big...
It's more than a pain in the ass, Dave. Let's be fair.
Oh, yeah.
October the 7th.
Obviously, yes.
Yeah, but October the 7th is more than a pain in the ass.
Okay, fine.
But you see what I mean? There's more on here, right? October 7th, there's more than that. Listen, you do not need Iranian funding, right, to have hatred for an occupying force. This is the bullshit implicit in their, I hate to use the word narrative, but it is. They act as if these groups surrounding Israel, you say surrounding, it's actually Israel that's embedded itself within them. Surrounding Israel, right, let's go with it, have no reason to hate Israel. The only reason they do is for, because they're ideological Islamist extremists and whatever, and they've got funding from Iran, and that's that. They have no reason to hate Israel,
I'm saying Iran has historically funded Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis. They've sold arms. And it's like, okay, but Actually, Iran is zero threat to the United States of America. They do not have nuclear weapons. They do not have the capability to hit America if they did have those nuclear weapons. And the idea of launching a war of choice, a war of aggression, because you say they chant mean things, and what if we didn't do anything and then something bad happens? I just think you're nowhere near the realm of like a just war.
No, that I totally agree with, but that isn't remotely what's happened here. October 7th happened. And then it became very clear that Iran
that's the starting point,
organizations
obviously,
that have been attacking Israel this entire time.
That's when it became clear, apparently.
Funding the organizations that have been attacking Israel this entire time. We had Yossi Cohen, the former director of Mossad, on the show to talk about the nuclear secrets they stole from Iran, which then they gave to the United Nations and everybody else to see for themselves. I mean, it's very clear Iran would like to have a nuclear weapon. And by the way, when we asked Yossi, why do they want one? He said, because it allows them to project power in the region, which is why anyone wants a nuclear weapon, right?
I think also the deterrent, you know, I mean, like, and it's not even clear to me that they wanted a nuclear weapon. And forgive me, I'm not taking Mossad's word for it that they do. It seems
it's not taking their word, it's the documents they stole.
Well, sure, but
I mean, I've not looked into this yet, so I'm definitely open to being corrected on it. But the Mossad had documents that it shared with the UN. Okay, great track record, everyone, you know, we all trust that, you know. Just like the IDF found mine camp or whatever in Gaza and all this nonsense. Yeah. Al-Shifa Hospital 3-story building, you know, we found that. Okay, yeah, you know, shows a 3D render, a few automatic guns on the floor, a few rockets here and there, you know, take our word for the rest.
But the point about October 7th, and which is why this is important, is ultimately you and I can agree, and Francis, I'm sure, does too, the war in Iraq was a mistake. Lots of mistakes have been made on foreign policy. The question is, what do you do when you are in the situation when October 7th has happened? We were just on Rogan's show, and I think Rogan agrees way more with you than he does with us about this. But he was like, yeah, if this happened to America, we'd be as bad, if not worse.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. You know, we could get into that, but let me just say,
it's a bullshit comparison.
I will very directly answer your question. But first, I will say, I don't think it's like, I get what Bassem was saying to you about that too. Like, I understand the argument of being like I could say the example I made at that Charlie Kirk event, with the now infamous Charlie Kirk event. But the comments that I made was like, hey, look, if you're pro-life, it's not like incumbent on you to have a plan for the baby's education or daycare or something like that. Like, you could just say, I'm against this option because I find this morally unacceptable. And then you figure it out for the rest. So, like, my point is, like, you can just oppose what Israel did to Gaza and not have to come up with a solution. But I think it's also a fair question to ask. Well, I think it's fine to say this is morally over the line.
No, not really, because ultimately they have to do something.
Okay, well, fine. There's a million clips of Charlie Kirk saying how much he loves Israel, and then there's other clips and they're all circulating. But his first reaction on the Patrick Bet David podcast, which he did he said that again later at speeches and stuff, was like, it is kind of bizarre that, and I've talked to like military experts who have said the exact same thing. They've been like, look, there is something, and I'm not alleging anything. I don't know, I'm not saying it was a false flag or something like that. I don't think that's the case.
So what do you think it is? What is it that you think an investigation will uncover?
Well, I mean, the massive intelligence failure, how the most surveilled area of the world got into the biggest fortress in the world, and there was such a long delay in areas of a response. I mean, that really should But
what do you think that likely points to?
I really don't know.
Because everyone we've spoken to goes, we've spoken to former soldiers, people who've served in the IDF, all kinds of people like that. And they basically say, look, we messed up on a whole set of levels. The intelligence people like Yossi blame the IDF blamed someone else. And that tends to be how these things go down, really. But I also, with all respect, do get the sense that quite a lot of people that talk about, well, why did it take them 6 hours to do this and that? I mean, we've had former British paratrooper on the show goes, well, look, in the UK, we've got, I don't remember the exact stats, but we've got like X thousand soldiers who are like on prime active duty. But that's a 24-hour call-up situation. Right. We don't have, thousands of people on a 1-hour response time. When they're in the barracks, they just pick up a rifle and head to the front line.
Yeah, but we also don't have a captive population of 2 million or 2.3 million. So again, it's a bullshit comparison. I mean, if the UK was holding, I don't know, Scotland or Wales or something captive, has surrounded them, enclosed them, we have a hostile population, you could say, definitely, Yeah, I think you are going to be, it's just not the same comparison, is it? It's like, I think actually Dave Smith goes on to say here, the US, mostly is surrounded by water. So you don't need to have much military prepared for people about to rush in off your various coasts, So it's a bullshit comparison. So this guy's either thick as shit or he's disingenuous, and I think it's a mixture.
As for how that could have happened.
Quite possibly.
But what I get, with all respect, is that quite a lot of people who ask the question seem to be implying something, but they never say what it is that they're implying.
No, I mean, well, Charlie asked the question, was there a stand-down order? I don't know. I mean, I don't know, but it does seem to me something really worthy of investigation and really getting to the bottom of that.
Netanyahu did say this when we interviewed him, right?
What? they said that
the investigation is super necessary once the war's over.
Yeah, right. Once the war's over. Okay, fine.
But
yeah,
you can't
we'll
have
see.
an investigation in the middle of a war.
I
Especially
guess.
to your point with the person who oversaw the
I'm not
the
sure
disaster.
exactly. Why can't you have an investigation while they're bombing Gaza?
Because
Why do the bombs have to stop dropping before we can look into that?
Because they're running a war effort. Imagine being investigated while you're trying to manage a war. That doesn't work.
Again, this was uploaded on the 12th of November 2025. This is over 2 years, right? Let's say they recorded it a week prior. This is like over 2 years since October 7th, 2023. You're telling me it's still a full-fledged war effort. There's no resource, nothing that can go into investigating. So anyone who buys that, right, even pro-Israelis, right, some of them are critical of Netanyahu and they want him to be investigated. This thicko here is still defending the fact that the guy is continuing to postpone investigations. There is no full-fledged war, my friend. Fucking friend. Take that, obviously.
Right. I guess. I don't exactly understand. But maybe.
Do you know?
I can't stand this prick.
Well, I don't know. No, I mean, I think.
Imagine. Okay. Well, imagine you run a podcast, which is a lot easier than running a war, right?
Well, sometimes it feels like it. Yeah,
right. But imagine you were under the greatest scrutiny in America, being investigated by every department.
This is actually how I feel when I'm running my podcast. You're not far off.
Well, you got to stop smoking weed then, because it's not that bad, right?
Fair enough.
But imagine you are being investigated by every department, and if you are found to have been responsible for a mistake that you made on your podcast, or someone that works for you made a mistake that then you have to cop the blame for, you get the electric chair. Would that affect your ability to run a podcast? I would say yes.
Yeah, I guess so. But then at the same time, it's like, it's also an awfully convenient thing to be able to say, I'll prosecute this war. And as soon as I'm done prosecuting the war, then you can start investigating.
I don't think,
and there's an incentive there to keep the thing going, right?
I don't think anyone who is in any way blamable for October 7th is desperate for that investigation to come as quickly as possible. I totally agree with you, of course. But let's come back.
So back to the
Netanyahu's resigned in disgrace. Dave Smith is Prime Minister of Israel.
Well, look, I would say that I think there are, again, like, you know, even with like what you're talking about with Rogan, and where I think people will go like, well, imagine Mexico attacked America in this way. Like, what would we do to Mexico? But I also do think that, like, there's a really fundamental difference between Gazans attacking Israel and Mexico attacking America. Because Mexico, although obviously there's a huge power discrepancy between our two governments, they are a government with a military and some degree of sovereignty. And it's much more like a Native American reservation,
okay, let's do that.
A Native American reservation where we never gave the Native American citizenship. And it's not a Native American reservation the way American Native American reservations are, where they can come and go as freely as they please. And it's just not, we never gave the Native American citizenship. We still hold them on these reservations. We've had a blockade around this reservation and an occupation going back 60 years. No, in that scenario, I would not find it justified for the American military to start carpet bombing the reservation. No, in fact, I think you would have a responsibility to make this a police action. Like, you have to arrest these people. And before Netanyahu, there was a terrorism problem since the creation of the state of Israel, partially the Zionists and partially the Arabs. But throughout the entire history of Israel, it was only Netanyahu who ever treated the terrorism problem as like a problem for the regular old military. It was always targeted assassinations, special operations. Again, Gaza is the most surveilled area in the world. They can wait these guys out. They can touch them. They can target them. Now, again, it might put IDF soldiers at more risk than sometimes. That's a thing that all modern...
You see this prick's little smirk there? See this fucking piece of shit's little smirk there, yeah? He values who he sees as his people more than... brown, Muslim, whatever, innocent women, children. Basically, we don't want to put our white, people, our Western Jewish, Europeans at risk. Fucking kill 5 of these brownies in it, along with the terrorists, and it's fine. We prefer that. Basically, because they don't value human life equally, and obviously they don't say that verbatim, but you see it in various statements that they make.
Is accept that we will increase the risk to our own guys to fight wars in more moral ways than we have in the past. But I think that it should have been, there was just a way to do it that would have, short of like right on October 8th, right away, where they cut the electricity, cut the water, cut all that, just essentially announcing that we're at war with the civilian population. Look, dude, I know me and you we don't see eye to eye on this. I know we're on different sides of this, but just even saying, did you say a few weeks ago when the ceasefire deal first starts, right? I'm going to ask you guys genuinely. So Hamas at one point, or Israel accuses Hamas, let's just say they're right. Hamas is slow rolling, returning the dead remains of some of the hostages. All the living hostages have been returned, but there are remains of dead hostages. And Israel accuses them of slow rolling. Let's even say they were. And so as a response to that, they go, we're halving the aid. Cutting in half the aid that's getting into Gaza. As a response to Hamas slow-rolling dead remains, not saying that doesn't mean anything, but like dead people are a little bit different than alive people, that you're going to cut off the aid to women and children because of, like, it's war. Doesn't that, like, on some human level, don't you guys go, yeah, that's wrong? Like, you shouldn't punish the civilian population like that.
Well, depends. Well, basically, he's going to defend it because he's a prick.
The issue is that the police action thing is really what this is all about, right? Because if you see this as a war,
let's talk about something
historically
else.
speaking, no country at war is required to provide aid to enemy civilians. That has never happened.
Well, it's not a matter of being required to provide it. It's a matter of blocking the aid that international organizations are trying to get through.
But whenever any country has been at war, this really hasn't been a concern of theirs ever. And Israel is doing way more than
this. Can't believe you just said that, but this is the bullshit that I've heard come out of this dumb twat's mouth before as well.
Whenever any country has been at war, this really hasn't been a concern of theirs ever. And Israel is doing way more than any country at war has done on this front. But it doesn't matter. I don't defend Israel. I don't say that everything they've done is right. I don't think they've done it the way that I would. Right, because if you see this as a war, I mean, historically speaking, no country at war is required to provide aid to enemy civilians. There's never.
I'm not sure I've heard of the term enemy civilians being used before, but as I say, layman here, not a layman here. No country, he's saying, has been required to provide aid to enemy civilians. This is what I mean. He's either, I think he's just a disingenuous prick, right? Israel is not providing aid. It's not coming out of the Israeli pocket. It's the rest of the world providing the aid. It's Israel that's bombing and blocking the aid. There's a difference between me giving you something, right, and me blocking someone else from giving you something. No one's asking Israel to give aid to Gaza. So don't fucking, straw man or bullshit your way out of this argument like the disingenuous twat that you are. I don't know if I can even put this out, but this is how I feel, to be honest. All they're saying is, just let the aid that is at the borders in. That's it. You're not providing it. You're just being asked not to block it.
Well, it's not a matter of being required to provide it. It's a matter of blocking the aid that international organizations are trying to get through.
But whenever any country has been at war, this really hasn't been a concern of theirs ever. And Israel is doing way more than any country at war has done.
After 2 years, to hear this twat say Israel is doing more than anyone on this front, it just shows that he's... How can he say he's not defending Israel?
But it doesn't matter. I don't defend Israel. I don't say that everything they've done is right. I don't think they've done it the way that I would have done it. You are really not going to like the way I would have done it. But what I'm trying to find out from you is, you say police action, and that's, we had this debate, but not face to face, where we exchanged videos on this, right? And we talked about Native American reservation, and you say police action. You've got 50,000 jihadi terrorists, jihadi as in willing to die for the cause. Is that fair? You shake your head.
Maybe. I mean, I don't know. I don't think any of us really know for sure. But yeah, I think the Israeli government was claiming something like that.
Are you disputing the numbers or the jihadism?
I just don't know. I don't know what the number of jihadists
are.
The number.
I just don't know.
It's the number you're unsure about.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not the jihadi part. It's
there are
okay, yeah. So 2 things here. I haven't heard of the estimate of 50,000 from an American or an Israeli prior to October 7th, right? So that to me is another indication that this guy is going with maximum numbers. He wants to pick out what has the highest possible estimate been for, as he says, terrorists in Gaza, say Hamas, how many fighters they have, PIJ and so on. What's the maximum? As far as I'm aware, the Americans estimated 25,000 Hamas, and then the rest are probably less than 10,000. He's gone with 50,000, right? Inflated the number as large as possible, basically. Maybe Hamas and these guys would say themselves those are their numbers. It's not in his interest to be taking that. Number 2, he says jihadi, Are you disputing that the jihadi? And he says jihadi meaning willing to die, right?
Jihadi as in willing to die for the cause.
Jihadi as in willing to die for the cause. Are members of the IDF not willing to die for their cause? Being part of an army, is it not a prerequisite to be willing to die for the cause? When you're part of a military, are you not supposed to be willing to die for your cause? Is this guy like 4 deserters or something? This guy supports the Ukrainian war, by the way. Are those guys on the Ukrainian front line, are they willing to die for their cause?
Is that fair? You shake your head.
Maybe. I mean, I don't know. I don't think any of us really know for sure. But yeah, I think
he's an Islamophobic piece of shit as well. That's the other part.
Are you disputing the numbers or the jihadism?
I just don't know. I don't know what the number of jihadists
So
who
it's
are
the,
willing to die. I just don't know.
It's the number you're unsure about.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not the jihadi part. It's
no, there are jihadists, obviously.
They are prepared to die.
Yes,
okay,
there are.
So you've got...
No need to emphasize, but they're prepared to die for it. Like, I don't understand. What kind of military man is not willing to die for his cause? Do you want a military consisting of thousands of people that aren't willing to fight and die for the cause? What's the point? What's the point of having them? What kind of argument is that? He just wants to throw the word jihadi out there with these negative connotations that twats like this associate with it, you know. It's just disgusting. It's just such a shit argument, you know.
So that we do agree, like 40 to 50 or 30
I
to
just,
50?
maybe sure,
Let's say
for
40
the sake of argument, sure.
40 to 50,000 people in a highly geographically concentrated area. Tiny area, right? Tiny area. 50,000 people with...
This is another example, right, of him picking figures that fit his argument best. So if you were to argue, right, so he said here, I'll just let him finish this.
40 to 50,000 people in a highly geographically concentrated area. Tiny area.
40 or 50,000 people, right? So we're hitting the top, and maybe 40, 50, yeah? In a highly densely populated area. Very tiny area, yeah. This same arsehole will make arguments against groups like Hamas and so on, who are proscribed terrorist groups according to the UN, the UK, US and so on, right? He will make the same argument. Why have they got tunnels under civilian areas? Why are they fighting out of civilian areas? Why don't they fight away from population centers? So this twat, when it suits him, he will say, oh, it's a tiny area with so many terrorists and so densely populated. How are we supposed to distinguish, basically? How are we not going to have collateral? And on the other hand, when it suits him, he will argue, oh, why are these terrorists situating themselves in areas that are highly populated? Why don't they essentially go somewhere else where there's less people? It shows the duplicity, honestly, and I'll end on that word because that's a big word.
50,000 people with pretty sophisticated weaponry, actually. IEDs everywhere.
For the most part, when it comes to explosives, the groups in Gaza are repurposing, meaning a certain percentage of the bombs that Israel drops, they don't explode. You know, they go wrong, they're faulty, let's say, you know, in layman terms, in terms that I understand. These groups are able to go to those bombs, take them apart however they do that, you know, locally within Gaza, take out the explosives, repurpose them, reuse them, put them together with other parts. For example, they might put them under the ground with a pressure plate where they know a tank is going to go past, or they estimate a tank is going to go past. And when the tank goes past, the weight on the pressure plate activates the explosive. It's improvised weaponry.
Booby traps everywhere, anti-tank missiles, sniper rifles. This is a militarized terrorist organization.
So the RPGs, the IEDs, even the snipers, these are all made in-house, as in within Gaza. This just comes back to one of the points earlier that, oh, Iran basically is... I don't think there can be any real doubt that Iran supports them and so on. But to say, you know, you could cut Iran off, these guys are still going to produce this weaponry. Just on that point earlier, this is the bullshit narrative that morons, yeah, I think that's the softest word. I know people have are less attuned to swearing, and I just can't stand this twat. So it's just such bollocks.
Really, do you really think you can deal with that in a police action?
Well, I think you can certainly deal with it with targeted assassinations, special operations, the way Israel's dealt with their terrorism problem for their...
I think it's a fair point. I don't think you can deal with that in police action. And this is where I think Dave Smith he's had this, I don't know, thought experiment, as he's saying, or alternative option. And I think it does fall short.
For their entire existence. But the point, again, about this is that I think that when if you occupying a country, you know, let's say like after a war, you occupy a country for 6 months or for a couple years or something like that. Israel has been occupying the West Bank and Gaza for longer than the Soviet Union occupied Eastern Europe. It's a 60-year, and at a certain point, you're like, you know, like there was this big thing where they just voted to annex the West Bank when J.D. Vance was there, just to be disrespectful to America. Even though they're our welfare country, they can still disrespect our let's think about the most basic of asks from America. Like, could you just not annex? But like, the truth is, it's already been annexed. All of this is Israel. You know, Israel's had, and yes,
just come back to the police
action. There's an obligation at that point that these people are your people, whether you acknowledge that or not. When you've had control of them for 60 years, you're the sovereign in these areas. Then, like, yeah, I think.
But how do you police 50,000 armed jihadis? How do you deal with that as a police action? Imagine you had the Native Americans. They were pretty badass boys when you guys first came here. Imagine you had 50,000 of them in Manhattan, right? And they just went on a slaughtering and raping and rampage, right? And then you're going,
which some of that is obviously bullshit that this guy is obviously bought into.
And then the cops I don't know that there's anyone who thinks that's realistic.
All right. Well, I mean, I don't
but
know.
Tell me how that's realistic.
Well,
I'm open to it.
Well, I'm just saying that, well, look, as I just said, Israel has a long history of targeted assassinations and
but
special
it's different. Because October 7th is a different level of threat to anything that's ever happened before.
You kept these people occupied for over 60 years. You never gave them
but
citizenship.
We already baked all of that in.
Yeah, I know. But I'm just making the point that whether you think it's logistically difficult to do or not, the truth is that they just destroyed the entire strip.
I don't think it's
and Hamas hasn't been eradicated anyway.
But that's I agree with. But what I'm saying is it's not logistically difficult. I just think it's wishful thinking to imagine that a threat. So here's how I see it. And you tell me where you think I'm wrong.
Sure.
October 7th happens. If you're the Prime Minister of Israel, you shit yourself. You go, fuck, we're being invaded. Our people are being slaughtered. You might also be worried about the blowback on you. You were in charge. I hear all the things that I think you might say. And then you go, we can't live with this. That's what any president or prime minister of a country that's been invaded in that way would say. We cannot have this on our doorstep. I don't care about history. I don't care who's right, who's wrong. We can't have this, right? The people who did this, the people who funded this, the people who orchestrated this, the people who participated in this, they need to hand themselves in for justice, or we're going to kill them all. That's what America would do, right? I think that's a fair claim.
I don't know. I don't know about that. But I mean, look, I mean.
So then they go in, and they are trying to eliminate Hamas. They're not trying to go in with special forces and take out Sinwar. They're not trying to take out this guy or the commander of this. They're trying to destroy Hamas. That's what they're trying to do.
I mean, that doesn't need rebutting, really, does it? Rebuttaling, sorry, does it? You know, when you're blowing up empty schools, you know, empty hospitals, empty mosques, you know, you've already cleared them. There are so many documented instances of this. And the Israelis, the IDF, they proudly post it, you know? So this is where I don't think you can be thick enough to come up with this. I think this is being disingenuous. They proudly showcase them going into buildings, setting up their explosives, stepping back, you know, dedicating it to someone and basically just blowing it up. The fact is, if you were able to go into a building with explosives, right, you weren't at risk of anyone shooting you at that point. So there's no enemy threat in the area. You're entering the building, you're laying out explosives. There can't be no threat to you in that building. And you then blow it up. The only real justification you can try and argue is one of two, right? One, oh, well, that building was being used, and at the time that we went in and strapped it with explosives, it wasn't being used because we cleared it, and then we blew it up so it couldn't be used again. If that's your justification, right, then you are basically justifying blowing up every single building as long as an armed militant remains using buildings. Obviously they're going to use buildings, aren't they? So you're arguing flattening the entire Gaza Strip. As long as there's a militant, you can say they're in a building, they've gone into that building, they're using that building, now we're going to have to blow up that building. So you're going to go through and blow up every single building. The other one is, oh, they've booby-trapped it, so we had to blow it up. They booby-trapped it. If you know they booby-trapped it, just don't go in, to be honest. How about you just don't go in? I mean, maybe that's an option. I don't know. Maybe just don't go in. But again, if you're going to use that argument, then these guys are going in again. The IDF have been going in and putting even more explosives in, apparently. Or they're blowing them up from the outside, more than likely. Actually, I've not looked into the specific difference here. But again, you can just keep arguing, oh, they're booby-trapping every building. It's just a bullshit argument. It honestly is just a bullshit argument. Instead of targeting individuals, which they do, I do believe they do target armed operatives. I do believe that. I don't agree with people who say, I don't have the impression, having followed it fairly closely as a layman, followed it fairly closely. They do target militants, but they're also primarily doing a demolition job, basically. That's what they're doing. And this guy is disingenuously not willing to acknowledge that.
Now, if you think that's not the right reaction, I understand. I think most people would say, if this has happened to your country, America, Britain, that's what the overwhelming majority of people would demand of their government. If the Native Americans had done this, that would be the nature of the response. I don't believe it's credible to say that can be addressed on a policing basis. That's a large-scale military operation, and there's no other way to do it.
What can be accomplished? Destroying Hamas.
Degrading Hamas to the point where he just can't come back.
Yeah.
Now,
I don't think that's been done, but okay. I mean, so look, I mean, I guess in your view, I wouldn't be able to degrade Hamas through police action or special ops or something like that. And in my view, it's like you're also not able to degrade Hamas. But my view comes with the bonus added of not slaughtering 100,000 people. So that's kind of the difference. But let me just say, can I just to your point, because I get what you're saying, and I do think there is something.
They have degraded Hamas, though, Dave. It's like
they've killed a whole lot of them and probably created another generation of Hamas that they will be fighting for years to come. And we'll see how this.
Sorry, I'm getting very interrupted. I get excited.
No, it's fine.
Yeah.
I'm guilty of the same thing. But I will say that, like, I do think there's this tendency for people to say, like, well, look, if you want to put yourself in the...
They have degraded Hamas, and as he says, they've killed probably 100,000 odd people, and they've just blown up building after building. The degrading of Hamas is besides the point, basically. It's like a secondary or tertiary objective. And this twat is intentionally failing to see that, I believe.
And me and Coleman talked about this a bit, but like, if you want to put yourself in the Israeli shoes, like, I'm fine with that. I think then we should also put ourselves in the Palestinian shoes, and then we should put ourselves in the American shoes, or the British shoes for that matter, because that's what I really am concerned with. So I would say, first of all, I think it was Aaron Matei actually who had the line, which I really liked a lot, where he said, in order to buy Israel's the justification for this, you have to accept the premise that nothing can justify October 7th. But that October 7th can justify anything.
I don't think it was his. I think it was maybe a Palestinian lady who came up with it first.
The world tells us that nothing can justify October 7th, and yet everything that Israel has done since October 7th can be justified by October 7th.
Okay. I'm sure Israel could look at October 7th and say, we find this to be intolerable, and we are entitled to a violent response. And if some innocent people get killed in that violent response, well, I'm sorry, but this just happened to us, and we have a right to do that. You could get there from the Palestinian perspective too.
It's different.
And although, there are differences. But the
differences are what matters here.
Okay, well, I don't know. I'm not sure they are, but
so
go ahead.
Here's the difference. The difference with, say, you mentioned, for example, the Soviet Union occupying Eastern Europe. Mm-hmm. When Eastern Europe wanted to break away from the Soviet Union, they didn't invade Moscow and women. They didn't take hostages. The difference is that armed resistance, look, man, we're men. If people came to our place and started putting us in chains, we'd rise up, we'd pick up a rifle, we'd engage in armed resistance. But when you deliberately target civilians, it's not the same. It's not the same as dropping bombs on terrorist houses who deliberately put their families in those houses. It's not the same. And that's the difference.
Yeah, see, I guess if it wasn't for all of the reports over the last 2 years, then like maybe I don't know. Is it that different than IDF soldiers taking target practice at kids, as multiple doctors in Gaza have reported? Is it that much different than the, what was it called, the Where's Daddy AI scheme, where they were following the terrorists back to their homes to take out their families too? I mean, like, no, I don't.
Do you think Israel is deliberately killing civilians? Like,
by definition, yes. Like,
by what definition?
Well, in the sense that, like,
okay, I get what he goes on here, but I'm not.
If you take in action that you know is going to result in
civilians being killed, with the
then it's deliberate.
The rules of war say that is what
the rules of war are a construct. I mean, listen, like,
sure.
We're talking about morality or logic here, but it's like, look,
let's talk about logic.
Well, you're again, all the reports, I mean, which you could go through, you go read Dave DeCamp's reporting for the last 2 years, and every single day there's been an article about another atrocity that was being committed against them. Now, there certainly is a difference between, like, the primitive nature of Hamas's attack and the barbaric nature of Hamas's attack, but at the same time, the end result of it is innocent people being slaughtered.
I know it is.
And that is so. And if you,
but there is a difference between Nazi Germany attacking Poland and the Western allies responding. Would you agree? There is a difference. They both result in people being killed, but there is a difference because it's about the conduct and who initiates that particular phase of it, right? Is that fair?
Yeah, but I think that...
So this phasing is not as much of a point as he means, It's like, I've kept my slave in the basement for 6 years, but listen, we've kind of agreed, listen, you stay down there, I'll stay up here, whatever, And one day he kicks the fucking door down, punches me in my face, and it's like, well, you started this phase, you initiated this phase, so now I'm going to, God forbid, anally rape with blunt objects like these reports state.
This is the difference with October the 7th. This is why it's a different category of violence, in my opinion, because you've got a situation where a band of terrorists deliberately invade another place, and they don't attack. I mean, sure, they attack some IDF facilities.
They killed a bunch of IDF.
They attack some IDF facilities, but really, it's about...
They didn't just attack some IDF facilities. They overran the few that surrounded Gaza. I don't want to go into specifics because I'd have to start looking it up. But approximately, well, everyone knows the figures roughly, don't they? 1,200 people were killed. Around 400 of them were armed military, whatever, security, whatever, and around 800, 750-ish were civilian. There were a number of barracks, or whatever they call them, surrounding Gaza. The armed groups basically went through and found there were actually points where if you go through the footage, they're saying, where is everyone? There isn't anyone in some of these barracks. So the insinuation again is that they just went for civilians. I'm not saying they didn't, by the way. I'm a bit unsure about some of it, to be totally honest. But there definitely was serious targeting of the Israeli military.
Taking Israelis hostage, raping them, killing women, killing children, dragging them off.
The raping is a whole other thing, isn't it? It's not one I'm about to go into right now.
To the dungeons and holding them there for power. That's not the same as what the IDF is doing. Would you accept that?
No,
He says holding them for power. What did they hold them for? What were their statements? What were their statements at the start? He says holding them for power. The 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds, 14-year-olds that Israel's holding, is it holding them for power? In administrative detention, indefinitely, no access to a lawyer often, no contact with their parents. What is that? What are they holding them for power? Would he argue that? It's bullshit to argue that, oh, it was just some sort of, for power or whatever. What are you on about? It was entirely clear why they took hostages. Whether one justifies it or argues for it or not, I'm not commenting on any of that. I'm merely commenting on the fact that this prick is intentionally omitting, is that even a word? Omitting or whatever, I don't know, ignoring the fact that the reason they took hostages was because they wanted to exchange them for hostages. For Palestinian hostages. And it's bullshit. It's bullshit, and it's being disingenuous to ignore that fact. Because what he does is he obscures and intentionally maligns any possible way of looking at this. Any step back from terrorist, most civil state, most democratic, liberal state in the world, in the Middle East, in the universe. Anything that kind of, challenges that balance there, it's ignored or dismissed.
No, well, right. Well, there's a lot of corruption. And there'll be like low-level primitive corruption type stuff. Like you could, if you're in, I don't know, there's countries if you're in Romania, it's kind of like a known thing, which is true, I think, in Mexico too. Like if you get pulled over by the cops, you could slip them some money and get out of it. And that's very low-level corruption, right? In the United States of America, good luck doing that. If you get pulled over for a DUI and you try to slip a cop a couple $100, maybe one time, but I can assure you that is not a good idea, and you're just going to get another charge. We don't have low-level primitive corruption like that. What we have is the prison guards union lobbies for mandatory minimums for marijuana. We have corruption on a much more sophisticated, but in a sense, it is still corruption, right? So in the sense that, yes, Israel, it's very, when you're having a fighter pilot bomb a building and you say it's collateral damage, I understand where that is not, it doesn't get as visceral reaction. It's not as barbaric and primitive as like Hamas breaking into Israel and just kind of killing everything that moves and then dragging as many people back to holding.
It's not as barbaric, right? If you're not the person in that building. If you're the person in that building, it's the most barbaric and hellish experience. And I'm saying that just based on what I've seen. Obviously, I've never been in that position, God forbid.
Captivity. But again, Israel, when they did the swap just a couple weeks ago after the ceasefire, Israel released 1,700 Gazans that they've been holding without charges of anything. They've been doing this, by the way, since well before this latest conflict in Gaza.
But you can't compare those two things either. Well, you can't. Hold on. You can't compare them.
You can compare them.
Well, you can't.
Maybe you can't equate them. You certainly can compare them.
Okay, fine. You can't equate them, which is what I'm really saying. You can't compare people, many of whom are violent terrorists.
And many maybe aren't.
Many of whom, including the women and children, innit?
The woman who you hear wailing as she hears her 1-year-old screaming for her from underneath a building of rubble, who's literally being tortured to death, just his bones crushing and screaming for his mother. She's feeling the same thing that those she's as much of a human being. She's feeling the exact same thing that those Israeli parents felt when their kids got slaughtered at that festival. The same thing me and you.
But October 7th is a sui generis thing. It's a one-of-a-kind thing, right? And the reason this really matters is, I think you paint a very important picture.
Why is it a one-of-a-kind thing? Why is it a one-of-a-kind thing? That's a real question. What makes it one of a kind? I think what he's saying is it's one of a kind because Israel never expected it, basically, is what he's arguing. They weren't prepared for it. The level of killing, the deaths on their side. It's one of a kind because, I'm sure people like him say, the largest attack on Jews in, they always say Jews, but they took Thai workers hostage. They kill non-Jews, but apparently it's always a bit against Jews. Apparently.
I think enough people, particularly on the pro-Israel side, get the scale of the suffering in Gaza, right? But if I were that father, I would be going, why are we here? How has this happened? And what I'd be saying is, why did you have to go and do October 7th? Why did you make me put a weapon cache in my house? why is Hamas doing this to me? We were living in relative peace. The Israelis had left. I'm not saying it was great. I'm not saying it was the greatest place to live in the world, right? But we were living in relative peace. The Israelis had left. I could go and work across the border, blah, 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 blah. And now I've got IDF bombs on my head because you went and raped.
Relative peace. Anyone watching this, if you're interested, obviously, just go and have a look into the history of Gaza, economically, in every sense. Go and have a look. Relative peace, this guy says. This guy says relative peace. The Israelis had left. These are bullshit points that I'm not even willing to, I don't even want to comment on.
Oh, well, I mean, look, I don't disagree with that. Right, you're saying the people of Gaza should be upset with Hamas for October 7th. Absolutely. And in fact, there were actually protests against Hamas.
When October the 7th happened, I was like, the people who are responsible for what comes after this is the people who did this. Because any leader of any country would react in something like this way, or probably worse.
What he's basically justifying there, you know, is... well, if they killed 5 times as many people as they have, if they dropped a nuke, maybe, I don't know, maybe it's a question for him. If the Israelis, if they decided, oh, we're going to have to nuke it, or we're going to have to use tactical nukes or something, or maybe we have to actually get rid of the population entirely. The bottom line is Hamas. It's Hamas's fault, basically. So the point he's making here is, it's what this Dave Smith was saying earlier, Aaron Mate is quoting, and I think that comes from another lady, but nothing that Israel has ever done could justify October 7th. But October 7th justifies everything, meaning anything that Israel does to Gaza, the blame is just on Hamas. That's basically his argument. And that's bullshit, obviously.
Same exact logic could be applied in the reverse. And to say, listen, 60 years of brutal occupation, man, whatever comes after this, you're responsible for that. Now, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that.
But that isn't true, though.
Well, it's as true as what you said.
No, it's not, because I'm not saying, see, take another example, Russia-Ukraine, right? Like, you know, I have Ukrainian family, I have Russian family too, and it's a tragic conflict. They're engaged in a brutal war, and it's a much more parity war, therefore it's much more brutal, actually, right? There's way more people, men on both sides being killed. If Ukrainians, who I support, went on a rampage in western parts of Russia and started raping women and taking children hostage, I would be like, there is no fucking way this is justified. There is no oppression, killing, butcher, murdering in Ukraine that Russian soldiers have done that justifies this. This isn't...
First, obviously the rape, this mass raping thing is a lot of shit that has been dealt with quite, even within Israel, not long ago, actually a while ago, sorry. Actually, I don't want to digress too much, but there's been enough debunking of this whole claim of mass systematic rapes. So that's a lot of crap, along with the 40 beheaded babies, which maybe he believes, I don't know. And, you know, in one of my other videos with Shell, I think I quoted, according to the Times of Israel, 50 of the 760 roughly civilians killed were 19 or younger, which is something like 7% of the overall killed. The idea that Hamas and the other armed fractions or whoever intentionally targeted babies and children, where do you stand on that?
Well, clearly they didn't. Clearly that was not the goal of the operation.
So I'm just saying babies and children targeting is all bullshit as well.
Outrageous. It's completely unacceptable. It's a different type of thing to the conflict you've been engaging in. And if you do this and the Russians then go ham, you caused this, is how I'd feel about it, right? Yeah, and that's the difference.
Yeah, I guess I just don't. So certainly what I would agree with is that, right, like no matter what, and I think this almost just comes down to like individualism versus collectivism. Like
I don't know if this Dave is going to point this out here, but I think he has before, but this is just not, it's just not a comparison. It's like, say, the Irish and the English, if they invaded and started killing and whatever, there is no comparison, man. You have a captive population. You are holding millions of people. You've held them for decades in a cage. Okay, that is not comparable. That is not comparable to Russia, Ukraine, or whatever. It's not the same thing whatsoever.
You don't have a right to just kill innocent people, no matter how much you've been suffering. Like, it doesn't matter, even if the Israeli government...
what happened.
Well, I'm saying that say like in the example of Hamas, or in the example you just used with Ukraine, right. It doesn't matter how brutal the Israeli government's been to you. You still can't just go kill teenagers at a festival. Like, it's not just a justified...
They say teenagers. I don't know. I'll have to just double check with that Times of Israel report. Actually, I'll just do that now. Of the 764 civilians killed, 36 civilians between the ages of 10 and 19. I haven't looked into the Nova Festival enough, right? Or specifically, I don't think anyway. But I'm wondering, what is he on about killing all these teenagers?
Say, like in the example of Hamas, or in the example you just used with Ukraine. Right. It doesn't matter how brutal the Israeli government's been to you. You still can't just go kill teenagers at a festival. Like, it's not just a justified response. Sure. So I completely agree with you.
I'll have to look into this after, but I don't know how many people were at the festival, because he's saying teenagers. This is maybe a bit too specific and unnecessary, maybe. Anyway, it's besides the point. obviously trying to justify or anything. But the thing is, these guys just run with these things. And from the start, there was an intentional exaggerating and just really, I mean, it doesn't even need to be expressed here, to be honest. But for the sake of finishing my thought here, they wanted to amplify everything and make everything as worse as possible. Beheaded babies, 40 ovens, you know, mass rapes, cutting off penises and putting it in their mouth. Sent the video to their mum on WhatsApp, someone actually claimed.
But I'd already heard about the most barbaric Hamas atrocities from the 10/7 massacre, but it keeps getting worse.
I looked at my WhatsApp. My second message was a video from my friend. Hamas filmed a video of them cutting his penis off, putting it inside of his mouth. That was at the Nova Festival.
And they sent it from his phone.
They used his face to unlock his phone to film the way that they tortured and killed him and the rest of our friends. They sent it to all of us in the WhatsApp group, and so the second message was to his mom. And that was how she found out what happened to her son.
These are the Hamas monsters we're going to destroy. Never again is known.
The swear word, who reported it, deleted it after. But anyway, I digress, I guess.
On that. But then also, as I said before, cutting off aid to the civilian population who's war-torn after 2 years.
How much aid is Russia providing to Ukraine? Right?
Wait, hold on. Let me just finish my point here.
Sorry.
Cutting off that aid is also not a legitimate response to like Hamas slow-rolling the dead remains of civilians.
Okay, so,
and
but it's like, this is what I'm saying to you. Russia's not providing any aid to you.
yeah, but also doesn't have a blockade around Ukraine.
As much as it can, it does. They deliberately...
Ukraine has been there's been no shortage of aid that's been getting
because
into
we're
Ukraine.
trying to help, but the Russians have done everything possible to cut off rail tracks and the supplies and everything.
Okay, so he says because we're trying to help. So why aren't we trying to help with getting aid into Gaza? How about that? Well, you might find that the Israelis are blocking it. Or they were at the start and then they're limiting it, and whatever the case is, I mean, it fluctuates, doesn't it? But the point is, it's controlled by the Israelis. So when he says, oh, it's only getting through because we're providing it or whatever, or because we're helping it or whatever, that is exactly the point. We're not in this case, as in the UK and so on. They just capitulate to the Israelis, just leave their trucks sat on the border.
Logistical infrastructure in rural
I
Western
100%
Ukraine.
think that if Russia's
not providing any aid, and no one's saying, oh, why aren't they providing aid?
Yeah,
Because
but also nobody's defending what Russia's doing. Nobody here is saying like, well, okay, maybe nobody.
Okay, Russia's not providing any aid. I don't think these guys addressed it enough. I think Dave Smith mentioned it earlier, and I don't know if it's not gone into this thicko's disingenuous head. I don't know. Honestly, don't know. But in this case, no one is asking Israel to provide the aid. They're just saying, don't block the aid. Just as he says, no one's asking Russia, why aren't you providing aid? Okay, yeah, well, aid's getting through, so no one's talking about aid, perhaps. If aid was sufficiently getting through and wasn't being blocked, there probably wouldn't be a huge conversation about aid problems.
Why aren't they providing aid?
Yeah, also nobody's defending what Russia's doing. Nobody here is saying like, well, okay, maybe nobody.
That's besides the point.
Okay, fair enough. So,
that is besides the point. Defending what Russia's doing is besides the point. It's not addressing the fact that aid is getting through for the Ukrainians, and the Ukrainians are able to leave their country, right? And the enemy is, in the case of the Ukrainians, the Russians are being confronted, and aid is coming through to the civilians. In this case, the friendly nation of, you know, the Western world, shall we say, put it like that. The leadership, anyway, I don't think people support them. Those are the guys blocking the aid. You know, anyway, this isn't the best breakdown or whatever, the most succinct and to the point breakdown. As did I plan, as probably I prefer. However, to be honest, part of this, as you can probably tell, is I'm just sick of these knobs. It's just so disgusting and distasteful and pathetic, and I just, it's just so disgusting, and I'm so sick of it, honestly.
Even that, Washington, D.C. has been funding Ukraine to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars.
And I don't watch them, to be honest. I've heard them a few times. I don't watch them. I clicked this one maybe a few days after it was uploaded, and I just thought, you know what, I have to say something, because otherwise I have this, you know, I just can't sit having heard this bullshit, you know. So that's why I'm watching it.
Over the last
but that's
few
not
years.
my point. My point is no one is criticizing Russia for not providing aid to Ukraine.
I think
no one is criticizing Russia.
I think people have
they're criticizing Russia for invading,
yes,
but they're not criticizing them for not providing aid.
I mean,
no one says they have a duty to feed Ukrainian civilians.
Well, it's also because the Ukrainian civilians aren't food insecure. They don't need that. I mean, it's like, look, like you said, there's more parity in that conflict. It's been much more military deaths on military deaths. And so it's just not the same dynamic. But yes, look, if Russia had Ukraine under a full blockade and then they invaded Ukraine and they weren't letting food in from the international community, absolutely, you would say you have an obligation to allow this aid in.
Sure, okay, fine.
And no other country would either.
Well, what do you mean no other country would? Okay, fine. Let's say they wouldn't. Right? So what are you saying, that Israel's comparable to Russia in their behavior towards allowing aid to a captive civilian population? No other country would either.
When the US was fighting in Iraq, they cut off electricity and water to the cities that they were sieging. It's what everyone does.
Yes, to certain cities.
It is.
Okay, but but
it's
also,
how you fight a war.
Yeah, but also
the difference is they've been a captive population for decades, and they've controlled everything that goes in and that comes out for decades.
Okay,
that's why war is terrible.
Okay, I agree with that. But so also, you didn't have George W. Bush going to the army and calling them Amalek. You also didn't have like people in the highest levels of the U.S. government floating out plans of ethnically cleansing all of Iraq and then taking it over for ourselves. And there's just many different things in this conflict. But yes, we're all in agreement that the war in Iraq was sure terrible. So that's not really the moral standard.
I've been hugging the mic for like an hour. Sorry, Francis.
No, it's all good. So, the great thing about our conversation is I think it shows new media at its very best. In that we're having a conversation, it's respectful, no one's trying to misrepresent.
I don't think I'm interested.
Things get a little bit.
Okay, I'll skip the head of it here just because
I was like, all right, I survived this. We got through it. There is just one more thing.
There is just one more thing. It's not a screenshot.
This huge divide on the right wing right now is all about this. I mean, it's all about foreign policy in Israel. At least, but no, to your point, that's in the commentator class. Whereas I do agree with you that broadly speaking for the rest of the country, things like, look, I mean, through all of 2024, every single poll that was, I mean, maybe there's one I missed, but every single poll that was done on it, it's like the two issues were the economy and immigration. That's what people care about.
Right.
But of course that makes sense. Right. But I also think that like the economy and immigration are also, they're related to all of these policies. I mean, immigration, not as much for us. I think much more so in Europe, that immigration is not unrelated to the fact that we fought wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, Somalia, Yemen, like all is that a big factor? No, you don't think the toppling of Gaddafi was a big factor in the migrant crisis?
I think the fact that people wanted to leave was partly caused by the conflicts, of course.
Sure.
Whether we had to let them in.
I certainly agree with that. You still don't have to let them in.
Right.
If you're going to have
bomb them and keep them out.
It is the worst of both worlds to have a lax immigration policy and then start funding civil wars in all of the southern, essentially like the foreign policy and the entitlement programs are very related to those phenomenons.
Dave, what a pleasure. Final question is always the same. What's the one thing we're not talking about that we really...
The fact that you're both dickheads. Yeah, so I have absolutely zero idea how I've edited this. I apologize to the viewers if my language was a bit all over. I just do not like these guys. I don't think that's without reason. I just think they're strongly disingenuous, to be honest. I mean, it's just bullshit arguments. I don't know if I've achieved what I set out to achieve here. Maybe I've just vented some frustration more than anything. Maybe this is something I should just imagine I uploaded and don't upload. But it's just disgusting. It's just disgusting, to be honest, because there's no excuse for the arguments they're making, and it's just disingenuous, and it's not challenged enough, man. And the fact that hundreds of thousands of people have watched this and the amount that will be sitting there nodding their heads with them, I think Dave Smith is excellent, to be honest. He's probably 10's not probably too low, but maybe like 15, 20 times as good as I could be, do you know what I mean, if I sat in front of them. This is not at all like a criticism of him. This is just me as a layman picking out the low-hanging fruit, to use that sort of metaphor. Just dealing with the easiest of bullshit that comes out of these guys' mouths. Yeah, so just let me know what you guys thought of it. If you want to see more of this kind of thing, I'm not sure I will do more of this kind of thing if you're still watching. I am currently editing a video that I did with someone else whose book I also read, and I have a few things planned, a few things I'm thinking about, and I'm hoping to dedicate a bit more time just to this channel and uploading more frequently. This was basically just off the cuff, really. So yeah, just let me know if you agree, disagree with what I said, and please excuse me for the language. I stand by it as far as these guys go, especially one of them, but it's always better not to use such language. Anyway, yeah, let me know what you guys think, and correct me if I got anything wrong also, and thank you for viewing.